On this day, 1 year ago, one of the most influential and successful video games of all time came out. And that is Baldur's Gate 3. When Baldur's Gate 3 released, it took the world by storm by how good and successful it was. Like, this game straight up had other companies complaining about how impressive it was. You have to be a different kind of game to be getting complaints that your game is too good that it makes unrealistic expectations for other studios. Larian Studios absolutely cooked with this game, and I'm so happy it did because this was arguably my most anticipated video game of all time. Larian Studios made my favorite game ever, which is Divinity Original Sin 2, so when I heard they were making Baldur's Gate 3, I was beyond hyped and knew this game was going to be amazing. And to see it straight up win Game of the Year was like the most perfect outcome. People were considering this one of the greatest video games ever made and one of the best this century, which is unbelievable praise to receive. On every possible platform, this game was getting 10s out of 10s, 9s out of 10s, like the reviews were absolutely insane for this game. Baldur's Gate 3 was getting universally praised. But one thing people were saying was that it was too quick to start putting Baldur's Gate 3 in that discussion of one of the greatest games ever, as it only recently came out and that we have to give it time to see if it ages well. And a year onwards, on its birthday, I can confidently say that this game has aged to perfection and in my opinion is still arguably the most impressive video game ever made. Baldur's Gate 3 deserved all the praise it received, and even a year onwards is still consistently pulling tens of thousands of players, which is extremely impressive for this kind of game. So with that being said, let's get into my review on Baldur's Gate 3 1 year later. Baldur's Gate 3 is a reboot of the beloved Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, and yeah, it's been a while since those games came out. Those games were massive back then, and for the series to get rebooted by such a great company like Larian Studios was amazing. Baldur's Gate 3 takes heavy inspirations from Dungeons & Dragons and it very much plays like it. With everything from the character classes, races, the dice roll mechanics, this game very much plays like a D&D game. And with Dungeons & Dragons, the possibilities are basically endless with how the playthrough can go. And the same can be said about Baldur's Gate 3. I've never seen a game with such a large scale of choices and ways that you can play the game and how it can turn out. There are 17,000 different variations of the endings. That is genuinely unheard of from any other game in existence. The fact that it's even possible to give the character that many different possibilities is insane, and you actually feel that way as you play. Lots of times when I play games, even with multiple endings, it usually only happens at specific points where you can take different directions with your choices. But with Baldur's Gate 3, I genuinely felt at every possible moment in the game I could have made a different decision that would have changed the outcome of that mission. I have never felt so much freedom and choices in a video game ever. With a lot of games, you kind of feel it pushing you in specific ways with the narrative as it's a fairly set story with a few different choices here and there. But Baldur's Gate 3 really lets you tell your own story and I love it so much. I would be getting stressed out with the freedom I had in this game. It was insane. And of course, with Baldur's Gate 3 taking heaviest inspiration from Dungeons & Dragons, its setting takes place in the Forgotten Realms, which is a very popular campaign setting for a lot of D&D games. And I love the setting so much. Probably my favorite part is how with each act we get a completely new setting and location to explore. In Act 1 we have the wilderness in the Underdark, in Act 2 we have the Shadow Curse Lands, and lastly with Act 3 we have Baldur's Gate. I really like getting a completely new location to explore as each section of this game feels very unique from the other and you get to experience different environments. As with the 3 acts we experience completely different locations and people. And talking about the people, each set of people feels so connected to their environment that we get to interact with such different kinds of people and characters throughout the entirety of the story. Something else that I completely love about the setting and world of Baldur's Gate 3 is how it really encourages exploration and just straight up touching every part of the map as you might find something useful. Every piece of land and walkable locations in this game are useful and have a purpose. And I feel like they were able to do that because of how they had completely unique areas for each act. It allowed them to really flesh it out with content and things to do and really makes exploring feel important and you always feel like you're missing out on something, which is a great feeling to have. A lot of games make these massive open worlds and they end up being like 30% filled with content and the rest just being empty space. But with Baldur's Gate 3, you still feel as if you have this large world as there's so much content in it and it makes the world feel a lot bigger than it actually is. Exploring for the first time takes hours upon hours to explore every nook and cranny, but once you do that, you actually realize it's a fairly quick walk to go across the entire map and it's not as big as you thought. But again, like I said, they filled with so much content with different places to explore, and they just absolutely nailed the exploration aspect of this game, and you genuinely enjoy discovering every secret that this game has to offer. The exploration is such a key part of the world, and another important part to Baldur's Gate 3 is its gameplay. The combat in Baldur's Gate 3 is fantastic in my opinion. My favorite part of it by far is the amount of different ways you can go about each encounter. With it being a turn-based combat system, there are generally so many different ways to play the fight. I just loved fighting an enemy a few times and learning more things about the fight and positioning my characters differently using different abilities and being able to take them out. Also, positioning your characters in this game is so important. Characters can get advantages by taking high ground, using objects for cover, or setting up traps. The amount of times I get cooked one fight then just slightly change where my characters are and just destroy them the next time around is insane. Like, I would get taken out in one turn and think there's no way of winning, and then you just eventually figure it out, and it's a great feeling. I feel like it gives off a very similar vibe to a Souls game where you learn more and more about the fight, and the satisfaction once winning is amazing. And the environment can also be changed by igniting flammable surfaces, making the ground icy, making it slippery, or destroying obstacles. Again, it's one of my favorite parts from the combat. They give you so many different ways to use the world around you to your advantage. Like, oh, I'm on this cliff, I can use Thunderwave to push them off. Or, oh, there's this grease on the floor, let me light it on fire. It makes the world feel so alive when you're able to use the surrounding area to your advantage and it's not just there for decoration. I also love all the different classes in this game and really being able to build such unique squads depending on who you bring and who work well together. You're able to change your class and all the people in your squad, so there are genuinely endless ways to go about the combat by making different combinations. And each one has its own strengths and weaknesses, and they all feel very unique from one another. I also really like how all of them feel very useful. I think Larian Studios did a good job of balancing the different classes and races to make them all useful in their own way. And oh my gosh, don't even get me started on the character creation in this game. I spent 3 hours on it because I was so stressed out trying to make a good character and build, and in the end, I don't even think I was able to do that. The amount of detail and variety in making your character is insane. I was torn for a while on whether or not I should pick an origin character, as in Divinity Original Sin 2, the game was just better in every way if you picked an origin character. But with Baldur's Gate 3, I decided to create my own guy. But again, there are just so many different possibilities for making your character from different classes, race, stats, origins. It's one of the best character creators out there. But back into the combat, I know for a fact that I probably barely understood the surface level mechanics for the combat and how to maximize them. And I think it is so cool how there is genuinely such a wide range of ways to use different abilities together and honestly cheese the game. There's so many times where, oh, some enemy or boss is too difficult, and you could probably do some stealthing where they don't see you and just take them out like that. Larian Studios very much awards the player for deeply understanding the mechanics of this game and making them work well together in different scenarios. One other thing about the combat though is that when you get stuck in a fight for like an hour trying to figure out how to defeat them, it's actually the worst thing ever. I feel like the dumbest person trying every possible move and placement of characters and still getting cooked. But then you just get that one attempt where all your attacks hit, they miss some of theirs, your attacks do just enough damage, and it's perfect. But I would be lying if I said I didn't save scum some of those fights, and if I missed like a crucial attack, I would just load back before that turn and do it again until I hit it. Like, I'm sorry, I am not about to waste a 30-minute fight and lose just cause I missed the last most crucial attack ever. And I'm fully aware of the fact that turn-based combats will turn a lot of people away from liking this game or even trying it. And look, I'm someone that honestly really enjoys turn-based combats and think they have the ability to offer a deeper gameplay system than most normal combat systems as they're real time. But I understand where they might be coming from when they say it looks boring or if it's not fun. Baldur's Gate 3, for how amazing of a game it is, it's just simply one of those where it's not going to appeal to everyone, and I'm amazed even with how successful it even got with it being a turn-based system and that not necessarily being the trendy style of gameplay. I also love the concept of using the dice rolls for skill checks. I think it's a really cool concept with having a good sleight of hand, proficiency in the skill, and other attributes to help with it. But again, there were definitely times where I save scummed those dice rolls so they would work. But for how much I did love the combat, there were definitely times where it did drag for me. Probably my least favorite moments in the entire game is when I would get stuck in a couple fight sequences back to back and each one of them would just take me so much time. Maybe I was just bad at the game, but there are definitely a few times where I would be stuck on a few fights back to back and it would just take me ages to beat them and it felt annoying. Like, they would be basic fights that aren't even that difficult, but they would just take up a lot of time, which was frustrating. But overall, the gameplay in Baldur's Gate 3 is fantastic. Another great piece of gameplay that Baldur's Gate 3 nails is its side content. I know I've mentioned Divinity Original Sin 2 a few times in this video, but I'm going to do it again as the side content in that game is unbelievable, and I knew they'd do the same for this game. There isn't like hundreds of quests in Baldur's Gate 3, but what they do an amazing job of is making each side mission actually worthwhile doing. With these side missions, they build the world more, they have a great story, they tie into the main story in some way, you get great loot, and there's just so many other benefits to doing it. The side content is actually memorable, and some of my favorite moments from the game are from these side missions. It's not your typical RPG where they just have all these empty side missions to just fill up time, and they usually just end up being some kind of fetch quest. These missions are all unique from one another and actually pose a use to the overall narrative and journey of this game. There are definitely games out there where your experience of the game wouldn't really change if you did the side content or not. But with Baldur's Gate 3, you're doing yourself a massive disservice by not doing every bit of side content that you can. And some of these side missions carry over multiple acts and even practically the entire game, like the mission with the Night Song. I mentioned this earlier in the video, but the amount of choice you have carries into these side missions. They do not let their foot off the gas whatsoever with giving the player the freedom in so many different ways of playing the missions the way they want. I don't think it's crazy to say, but every single piece of side content in this game, I would believe you can do in multiple ways that are different from the last. And this is side content, but they still put in high levels of detail and effort into them, and the praise they deserve for this will never be enough. Baldur's Gate 3 might generally be the game with the most replayability value that I have ever seen in my life. In every aspect, you can have a different playthrough. From the character you pick, the class you choose, decisions you make during the game and side missions, and the main story. Every playthrough of this game would be completely different from the last. And not even just with choices, but the style of which you play the game. You can really play the game in any style that you want to, and I think that's just the coolest thing ever. Another heavy part of Baldur's Gate 3 are its companions, and I just love the way that they handle them. Starting things off, probably my favorite part about the companions is how their stories go across the entirety of the game. I really like it because it genuinely feels like you watch them grow and go on this personal journey simultaneously along with the main plot. And I feel like I don't see a lot of games handle their side characters in that way where they flesh them out to that degree. But Larian Studios just knows how to write some amazing companions and give them such depth. I really enjoy every single companion's missions in this game. Firstly, we have Shadowheart and her journey with defying Shar. Then we have Asterion and his journey to take out Cazador and to be free. Then we have Gale and this whole mission involving Mystra and the Orb, Karlach's journey trying to find a way to fix the engine in her chest, Will's whole mission with finding his father and dealing with the pact with Mizora, and lastly Lae'zel and her journey with the Gith and Vlaakith and ultimately defying her as well. It's a funny theme that I see with all these quest lines, which was that all of them dealt with this higher power in their life that they defied in some way or trying to get away from. Shadowheart with Shar, Asterion with Cazador, Gale with Mystra, Karlach with Zariel, Will with Mizora, and Lae'zel with Vlaakith. But even if they were similar in ways, they are all so different and offer such unique journeys for each one of the characters. In my personal opinion, I like Shadowheart's questline the most. What really took it for me was the Act 2 portion where it tied into the main story and Night Song, and the ending of her story where she had to decide to sacrifice her parents. But again, I did really enjoy everyone's questline, and watching them all develop was amazing and one of my favorite parts from the game. I think you as a character really form great bonds with each one of your companions throughout, and you generally feel like you are close to them. Diving into all their questlines a bit more, Shadowheart's again is fantastic, and personally I picked her to defy Shar. And watching her deal with that trauma of straight up learning about this whole life that she forgot about and how she was stolen from her parents and the people of Saloon. It was such a good plotline and I enjoyed every second of it. And at the end, having to make that decision by either saving her parents but staying bound to Shar or sacrificing her parents and breaking that bond that Shar has on her was such a difficult choice. And I really just like her entire journey that she goes on, and I romanced her as well, and I think that just adds an even deeper layer to her story. Then, with Asterion, the development that he has in this game is fantastic. Watching him develop from this person who really never wanted to help anyone to at the end of this game kind of being this hero and helping others was awesome to see. And his whole plotline with Cazador and trying to break free from him was really done well. For me, I went down the route where he doesn't complete the ritual and ascend and doesn't get sucked into the idea of power like Cazador did. I also love Gale's questline. The entire idea behind him defying Mystra and having this orb inside of him that's going to explode is a really cool concept. I really like seeing him deal with his past and trying to make good of it and become a better person. And in the end, him denying the crown of Karsus, living, and the orb no longer having any effects on him was a great ending for his character. Then with Karlach, her questline isn't personally one of my favorites, but her as a character was amazing. She was really funny, outgoing, and just overall a great character. Watching her deal with the engine in her chest that is destined to explode was really interesting to see. And in the end of my playthrough, her and Will go back to Avernus to find a way to fix her engine or get a new one. Then with Will, I like his story as well. The really interesting thing with his story was the pact that he made with Mizora and us spending the game trying to find a way to break it. Mizora is a hater, bro, I swear. She did not want to see my boy Will happy. Making him pick between his father or breaking the pact was crazy. But even with letting his father go, we were still able to save him on the Iron Throne, so we were chilling. And lastly, we have Lae'zel, and she was probably my least favorite questline. Again, there were definitely other routes to go down that could have made her questline a lot more interesting. Like, I basically said no to every possible route with her story. I didn't do the Githyanki crash, and I didn't get the Orphic hammer, so like nothing really happened in her story. Oh, and she was also the one that Orin captured, so there was like a solid 30-ish hours where she just was not in my camp or squad. So that probably was the reason I didn't like her story too much, and I basically didn't do much of it besides having her define Vlaakith, and making her realize that Vlaakith kinda sucks like basically every other godlike figure in this game. But one complaint I do kind of have is that I felt like there was a lack of interaction with the companions together, or like the companions forming bonds with one another. The best bond I really remember that was formed was Will and Karlach, which was actually a really good one. But outside of that, I feel like there was a lack of interaction between your companions. You get some dialogue things as you play the game, but it's not much. Again, I'm willing to admit that to a point, I probably missed some stuff in this game that dives more into that, but from my playthrough there was a lack of it, and I would have really liked to see some more bonds formed between our companions. Another great thing about all the characters is how amazingly they're all voice acted. Not even just our companions, but every character in this game is voice acted beautifully, and this is something that Larian Studios always seems to know. The way they deliver their lines, the tone, everything is just done to perfection. Overall, the companions in this game are fantastic and are generally one of the most important parts to the game in my opinion. There are not many games out there that add this amount of depth to side characters, and it's one of the things that truly make this game stand out. There are just so many different possible outcomes for your companions. Like, this was my personal journey with all my characters, but you could have had a completely different experience, which is just so cool to see. So many of them can just die at certain points. It's crazy how terrible the game can truly turn out for them. I love all the companions in this game, and I really enjoy how they are all on this journey with you throughout the entire game. Last but not least, we can finally head into the final section of this video, which is the story and narrative. To summarize it in one sentence, I think it's amazing. I know I'm going to be sounding like a broken record by now, but the standout part of the story is the range of choices that you have. I said this earlier, but there are a total of 17,000 different variations of the endings. So let's say you got an ending that you didn't like, there's most likely one out there that you would like. So to some degree, it is hard to fully judge the narrative as I've only done one playthrough and there are just so many different ways to play it. But I'll do my best. And to preface beforehand, my playthrough consisted of a custom created character and I was going down the route of a basic hero, nothing too interesting, I just wanted everything to go well. But actually getting into it, the overall plot of this game is a really good one. The whole idea of the tadpoles in our head that are supposed to turn us into mind flayers, but we are the exception, us not turning into one, is a really interesting plotline. Then everything with the Emperor being the one that was protecting us, the Elder Brain, the Crown of Karsus, and us seeking to destroy it was awesome and I loved watching it unfold. The plot starts off simple with us just trying to find a cure for the tadpole, but the story just continues to expand into this massive journey and adventure, and it's amazing. The game does start off fairly slowly though, especially like the first act and most of the second act until the end. Bro, I was so confused what was going on this entire time. We were just trying to find this stupid cure that didn't exist. But by the end of Act 2 and all of Act 3, the story really starts to pick up and dots start connecting and you really start to see so many different possibilities with the overall narrative and choices that you can make. Again, it's so difficult to judge this main story because the playthrough I had is most likely the polar opposite of someone else's playthrough. But I think that in of itself is the coolest thing ever and really makes the story and narrative amazing. Like, I'm someone that really doesn't look to replay a game after beating it unless there's like multiple years in between playing. Especially a game of this size. But just seeing so many different possible plot lines and way I could play the game, it makes me want to do a whole new playthrough right now. The one I easily want to do the most is a redeemed Dark Urge playthrough. It just looks like so much fun. One of my biggest issues with a custom created character is that they got like barely any lines of voice dialogue besides some remarks during fights or gameplay. But I am the one that picked a custom created character and I still had a great time with that playthrough, but the Dark Urge just looks like so much fun. But getting more into the actual story, starting with Act 1, is probably my second favorite act in the game. I think it does an amazing job of setting up the world. It gets you asking questions about what's going on, and I just really like the setting of the wilderness and the Underdark. The whole opening scene of escaping the Nautiloid is awesome and it sets up the game well. I also find it very cool how you could avoid recruiting characters until later. Like with Shadowheart, you could ignore her but then recruit her later, which I found really cool. Not too much happens narratively in Act 1, which is probably my biggest issue, but there's still so much amazing stuff to do. You can easily spend like 50-ish hours in this act. And there are still parts that I extremely enjoy, like the entire Emerald Grove plotline was good and the entire Underdark section was so cool. I love the main quest and the side stuff that you could do down there. Also, just recruiting all your companions is great and each introduction sets up a good foundation for their journey that you're going to go on with those characters. And then everything with the Dream Visitor was super interesting and was hinting at how there was a lot more going on in the story than meets the eye. But yeah, most of this act revolves around attempting different ways to remove the tadpole, but none of them really working, and just basically getting acclimated to the game. Then with Act 2, this one is a lot shorter compared to Act 1 and 3. But the ending of Act 2 with the whole encounter with the Night Song, the fight against Ketheric Thorm, was amazing. With Act 2, it takes place completely in the Shadow Curselands, which was such a cool setting and changed, and I really liked the tone switch that we got with it. In this act, we really start to learn more about the tadpoles, the mind flayers, the Dead Three. Overall, the plot just starts to deepen even more. In this act, we meet the first of the Dead Three, and that is Ketheric Thorm. And in my personal opinion, Thorm is probably the best one out of the Dead Three. I honestly felt like Orin and Gortash were somewhat underwhelming for me, especially compared to the fight that we got with Thorm. The other two fights just did not live up to that at all. The build up to both of their fights were great and trying to figure out where they were and how to get to them was awesome, but the fight themselves were pretty disappointing. But the entire final push of Act 2 was just fantastic in every way and some of my favorite parts in the entire game. But in the end of Act 2 we also see Gortash and Orin for the first time as well with the Netherbring. The final fight with Ketheric Thorm was just so well done and it really felt like the ending of the act. The scale of it and everything just built up the final fight so well. And when he entered that second form, bro, it was crazy. Being able to free the Shadow Curselands from the curse was great to see as well. Overall, Act 2 is fairly short, but really starts to push the narrative towards the end. But finally, with Act 3, this is hands down my favorite act in this entire game. The scale of it, the amount of stuff to do, the main story really starts to pick up. There's just so much going on here, and it's amazing. Firstly, before getting into the main story bits, this is where we wrap up all our companions' missions, and I mentioned this already, but I love how these stories last the entirety of the game. It makes completing them feel so much more worth it and fulfilling. But walking into Baldur's Gate for the first time was so stressful. The amount of quest markers that were in this place was insane. This was hands down the act that I spent the most time in. There was just so much stuff to do and I loved every second of it. I think they did an amazing job of making Baldur's Gate and I felt so immersed in the city and it felt really alive. But with the story, this heavily focuses around taking out Orin and Gortash and getting their nether stones, then taking out the Elderbrain. But even with that, there's so much player choice here and so many different routes that you can go down. You could side with Orin and kill Gortash first, then fight Orin. You could side with Gortash and take out Orin, then form a partnership with Gortash. You could form no partnership with anyone and just take both of them out. There are multiple ways to go with these choices. Another big option that opens up here is a potential deal with Raphael. This opens up an entirely different route for this game, as he gives us the opportunity to free Orpheus and in return we give him the crown once we get it. But there was no way I was going to let him get that crown. I am never trusting a devil. But here, again, was one of my favorite moments with this game. I didn't want to give Raphael the crown, but wondered if there was still a way to obtain the Orphic Hammer to free Orpheus and thought that would be really cool if I could do that. And lo and behold, of course there is. This was one of those epiphany moments where I was like, wow, if there's a direction you want to take the story and narrative, you can probably do it. This game allows you to really play the game in any way that you want to. And I think it truly embodies the title of an RPG. So many of these role-playing games, the role-playing is actually somewhat limited, but you can straight up do whatever you want in this game and I love it so much. But moving into the final portion of this game, I love the finale. Going after the Netherbrain, having the big fight in Baldur's Gate, then fighting enemies on top of the brain, it was crazy. They really built the scene so well and the set piece was fantastic. Being able to see all the Nautiloids in the background destroying the city as you're fighting was insane. For me in my playthrough, it was my team and the Emperor who took out and destroyed the Netherbrain with the Emperor using the Netherstones. I'm gonna be so for real, I did not trust the Emperor for the longest time and genuinely thought he was gonna betray me at any moment. I did not trust this dude for the longest time until basically the end of Act 3 where I was like, you know what, this guy might actually be chill, and he was. But when he tried making a move on me, bro, I was not feeling that at all. I was just trying to finish up my Shadowheart romance, but this dude was getting in my way. He kept wanting me to become a mind flayer like, dude, I'm not doing that. But getting back on track, I was so happy with the ending I got in this game. It was as happy as I could have ever imagined. We saved Baldur's Gate and all my companions got a happy ending. Karlach was like somewhat of a mixed ending. She went back to Avernus with Will, but in the reunion, she seemed like she was doing good. And oh my gosh, the final reunion with all our characters is simply perfect. I was not expecting to get a moment like this, but I needed it so bad. Just seeing them all together one final time, being able to talk to them and see what they've been up to ever since the final fight was beautiful. My character got his happy ending with Shadowheart, and all my companions seemed to be living their best lives. It was such a heartwarming ending, and it made me so happy that I got it. You really form these bonds with all these characters, and I know it was straight up a few minutes real time, but seeing all of them like 6 months onwards felt so weird, and I felt like I haven't seen them in ages. Overall, the ending to my playthrough was perfect. But in general, the story is amazing in every way. And this is truly, in my opinion, like the ultimate RPG experience for the freedom that it gives you within its story and being able to write your own adventure basically. Baldur's Gate 3, in my opinion, is truly a generational game. And look, there are some games out there that I enjoy more than this, but I have never been more blown away in my life by the sheer scale and size that this game has. It really is one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had. You really feel a part of this world and your choices truly matter. Like genuinely, every single one matters. I was saving every 5 seconds because I was scared I was going to pick the wrong thing. I knew this game was going to be an all-time great, but I was still blown away by how good it was. Even a year onwards, Baldur's Gate 3 is still more impressive than any other game that I've ever seen come out, and I don't know when the next time we're going to see a game that can rival what this game did. Not saying there won't be better games, but where a game challenges and tries to surpass what Baldur's Gate 3 did in terms of player choice, replayability, scale, and all these different things. I truly think Larian Studios is the ultimate studio for RPGs. I don't think there is a better studio out there than them. Their past 2 games are some of my favorite video games of all time. Divinity Original Sin 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 are masterpieces, and the way that Larian Studios makes these games, I genuinely think they're just going to get better and better. It's been said that they are working on 2 new games, and I'm really hoping one of them is Divinity Original Sin 3 and a new IP. I promise you, if they make a Divinity Original Sin 3, that game will destroy the internet by how good it is. But overall, Baldur's Gate 3 is one of those video games that are just a piece of art in every aspect of it. You really just have to sit back and question how a game like this even exists and how privileged we were to get a game as good as it. My final rating of Baldur's Gate 3 is a 10 out of 10. It is one of the greatest video games that I've ever played, and in my opinion, the most impressive. And even 1 year later, this game blows everything else out of the water and is 100% worth playing still. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much, and I really hope you enjoyed watching. If you did, it would mean a lot if you could comment, like, and subscribe. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Your support means the world to me. You guys don't even understand. Thank you so much for supporting the page, and I will see you in the next video.